We've all experienced moments where just one sentence transformed our entire perspective. A single phrase that pulled us out of despair, a sentence that awakened us, that reminded us who we really are. Now imagine the profound impact this has on someone who lives in avoidance, someone who has built walls not because they don't want love, but because love has always felt unsafe. For an avoidant, their nervous system is trained to retreat, to shut down, to pull back when closeness feels threatening. They've rehearsed that story for years. If I let you in, I'll lose myself. But here's the truth, you don't need 1,000 conversations to begin softening that armor. Sometimes all it takes is one sentence spoken with truth, love, and certainty to rewire the emotional code inside them. It might be a sentence that says, "You're safe with me," or "I see you and I'm not going anywhere." It could be as simple as, "You don't have to earn my love, it's already here." When those words are delivered with authenticity, they carry a force greater than logic. They bypass the mind's resistance and land in the heart. That's because language doesn't just describe reality, it creates it. See, when we use language consciously, we shift the story an avoidant has been telling themselves. Instead of the old narrative of isolation, they begin to hear a new one: connection without losing freedom, intimacy without suffocation, love without danger. That single sentence becomes a seed planted in the soil of their heart, and when it's watered with consistency and presence, it grows into trust. The beauty is, this isn't about manipulation, it's about alignment with truth. Deep down, every avoidant is longing for love just as much as anyone else. They're not cold. They're not unreachable. They're just waiting for the one moment that feels safe enough to let go. And your words, when chosen wisely, can be the key that unlocks the door. That's why you must recognize the divine principle behind all human connection. Words carry spirit. They're not just vibrations in the air. They're carriers of faith, of hope, of healing. When you speak life into someone who's used to shutting down, you're not just talking to their mind. You're talking to their soul. And the soul always remembers truth. So never underestimate the power of one sentence. It can reframe years of fear. It can dissolve walls that seemed unbreakable. It can transform avoidance into openness, distance into closeness, fear into love. Speak words that heal, words that liberate, words that awaken. Because just one sentence, spoken with love and certainty, can change everything. Language is not just a collection of sounds we string together to communicate. It is the most powerful tool we possess to shape our emotional reality. Every word carries energy, and every sentence carries a meaning that can either chain us to the past or liberate us into a new future. Think about it, civilizations have been built and destroyed by words. Love has been ignited and wars have been started, all because of sentences spoken at the right or wrong moment. Now, when it comes to someone who lives in avoidance, someone who has spent a lifetime retreating from intimacy to protect themselves, the power of language becomes even more profound. Because in their world, words are not neutral. Words determine whether their walls stay up or begin to fall. One sentence can act like a key unlocking a door that has been shut for years. It doesn't need to be complicated or poetic. In fact, the simpler, the better. The right sentence spoken with presence and conviction can shift the deepest emotional state. Why? Because language doesn't just describe experience, it codes it. When you say to an avoidant, "You're safe here," you're not just informing them of safety, you're creating safety in that very moment. Their nervous system receives a new instruction, a new pattern, and for a brief moment, the old conditioning pauses. That pause is the beginning of transformation. Most people underestimate how much their words matter. They throw them around carelessly, unaware that every phrase has the power to build or destroy trust. For an avoidant who is hyper, attuned to any threat of engulfment, language becomes the radar by which they measure safety. If your words are inconsistent, dismissive, or ambiguous, they will reinforce the old story. I can't trust closeness. But if your words are grounded, clear, and infused with love, you disrupt that narrative. You create a new association. Maybe closeness doesn't mean danger. This is not just communication, it's reprogramming. Imagine someone who has lived their whole life hearing, "You're too much," "You're not enough," or "Love always comes with conditions." Those sentences are like codes written into their emotional operating system. They explain why they shut down, why they distance, why they fear love. Now imagine introducing a new code: "You are already enough." That sentence, when spoken with sincerity, begins rewriting the story. It may not erase all the pain overnight, but it plants a new possibility in the soil of their heart. And possibilities are the birthplace of transformation. The mind loves complexity, but the heart responds to simplicity. A single phrase spoken with intention can do what years of overthinking cannot. It can shift emotional reality in an instant. For the avoidant, this is not about convincing them or overwhelming them with words. It's about delivering one sentence that penetrates the armor, bypasses the defenses, and speaks directly to their soul. That's the power of language. It doesn't just reach the ears, it reaches the spirit. And when spirit is touched, even the most guarded heart begins to awaken. An avoidant doesn't simply avoid love because they don't care, because they lack depth. They avoid because they live inside a narrative. a story that tells them closeness equals danger, intimacy equals loss of self, vulnerability equals pain. This story is not one they consciously wrote. It was etched into their nervous system by experiences of neglect, betrayal, or overwhelming pressure when they were too young to protect themselves. Over time, this story became their shield. It became the script by which they navigate relationships. If I let someone in, I'll be consumed. If I stay distant, I'll stay safe. The tragedy is that this story robs them of the very connection they crave most. But the beauty is that a single moment, a single sentence, can begin to reframe that narrative and shift everything. Reframing is not about denial or pretending the past didn't happen. It's about offering a new lens through which old patterns can be seen differently. When you tell an avoidant something as simple as, "Your freedom matters to me as much as your closeness," you're not just speaking words, you're rewriting their inner script. You're reframing love from a threat into a space of safety. Suddenly, what once felt like a trap begins to feel like a choice. And choice is the oxygen avoidants need in order to breathe within relationships. Think about how powerful reframing can be. If for years, someone's inner voice has been whispering, "Connection will suffocate me," then introducing a new narrative, "Connection can expand me," is revolutionary. The human brain is wired to cling to patterns, even destructive ones, because they feel familiar. But when a new story is introduced, it creates cognitive dissonance. For the avoidant, that dissonance sounds like, wait, maybe love doesn't mean losing myself. Maybe it can mean finding more of myself. That moment of curiosity cracks open a window where possibility can rush in, and it doesn't require endless lectures or complicated therapy speak. In fact, too much explanation can make the avoidant retreat further. What works is a sentence that reframes reality in a way that feels both safe and true. For example, "I don't want to change you. I want to know you." That reframing dismantles the old fear of being controlled. Or, "You don't have to do anything for me to stay." That reframing attacks the lie that love is conditional. Each sentence, when delivered with authenticity, begins to loosen the grip of the old narrative. Reframing is not manipulation, it's liberation. It's about helping someone who has been trapped in the prison of their own story see that there's another way forward. When you change the story, you change the meaning. And when you change the meaning, you change the emotion. For an avoidant whose emotions are wired around defense, that shift is everything. Suddenly, walls that seemed like fortresses begin to look like cages, and they may realize they don't actually want to live behind them anymore. One reframe at the right moment can awaken a longing for connection that was buried under fear. One reframe can transform avoidance into openness, suspicion into curiosity, resistance into trust. That's the power of language when used as a tool to reframe the narrative. It doesn't just change the story. They begin to live in a new story, one where love feels like freedom, not a threat. When someone carries an avoidant pattern, their entire nervous system has been trained to interpret intimacy as unsafe. Closeness triggers alarms inside them, alarms that say, run, hide, protect yourself. They are not rejecting love because they don't want it. They are rejecting it because their body has learned to associate connection with danger. And this is where the power of a single sentence comes alive. Words, when used with intention, can act as anchors of emotional safety. They can quiet the alarms and create an invisible safety net that makes it possible for the avoidant to stay instead of flee. Safety is the foundation of every deep relationship. Without it, trust cannot exist, and without trust, no intimacy is possible. For the avoidant, the absence of safety is the reason their walls are so high and their distance so persistent. But what most people miss is that safety isn't created through grand gestures or endless explanations. It is created in moments of clarity, consistency, and honesty. A sentence like, "You don't need to perform to be loved here," can dismantle the performance mask an avoidant has been hiding behind for years. It is not the complexity of the sentence that matters. It is the certainty and truth it carries. When we speak words that offer emotional safety, we are sending signals to the nervous system. We're essentially telling the body, it's okay to relax now. For an avoidant whose body is wired for vigilance, these signals are transformative. Imagine someone who has spent a lifetime anticipating criticism or abandonment. Then imagine them hearing, "I'm not here to judge you, I'm here to understand you." That one sentence shifts their entire state. Their breath slows down. Their shoulders drop. Their defenses soften. Safety isn't just intellectual, it's visceral, and words have the power to create it instantly. It's important to understand that avoidants don't trust easily. They scan for inconsistencies. They look for hidden agendas. They expect pressure and they expect disappointment. But when your words repeatedly reinforce safety, when they carry no demand but only acceptance, you begin to rewire their expectation. Instead of anticipating harm, they begin to anticipate peace. That shift is monumental because it creates space for vulnerability. Vulnerability is impossible without safety, but once safety is present, the avoidance armor no longer feels necessary. This is why one sentence can matter so much. It is not a magic trick, but it is a seed that when planted and repeated through presence and congruence grows into trust. And trust is the currency of love. Without it, connection dies. With it, even the most guarded heart begins to open. Words like, "I won't take away your freedom," or "you don't have to be different for me to stay," tell the avoidant nervous system that this connection is not a threat. Slowly, their emotional body begins to associate closeness with calm instead of fear. Every time we choose words that build emotional safety, we are laying a new foundation for intimacy. The avoidant who once believed safety was impossible begins to taste it in your presence. And when they feel safe, they stop running. Not because they've been convinced to stay, but because, for the first time, staying feels like home. Every human being has a core need for belonging, for feeling seen, accepted, and loved without conditions. For the avoidant, this need is no less powerful, but it is buried beneath layers of fear. They've been conditioned to believe that intimacy requires our sacrifice, that closeness will lead to losing themselves. So they often deny their longing for connection, convincing themselves they don't need anyone. But deep inside, the desire for identity and belonging burns just as strongly as it does in anyone else. And sometimes, all it takes is one sentence to awaken that long and remind them that they can belong without surrendering their individuality. An avoidant fears that if they open themselves up, they'll disappear in someone else's world. They fear being swallowed by another person's expectations, demands, or judgments. But imagine telling them, "I love who you are, not who I want you to be." That sentence doesn't just reassure them, it reframes belonging from a trap into a gift. It tells them they can remain fully themselves and still be connected. It allows them to hold on to their sense of identity while stepping into the experience of love. And that combination, being free and being loved, is exactly what their soul has been waiting to hear. When you affirm someone's identity, you disarm their deepest fear. You're no longer asking them to change, to prove, or to meet a hidden standard. You're offering belonging as they are, raw and unpolished. For the avoidant, this is revolutionary. Their past has taught them that acceptance is conditional, that approval comes only after performance, and that love requires the loss of self. One sentence of unconditional acceptance begins to crack that illusion. It whispers, "You can be yourself and still be chosen." That truth has the power to rewrite a lifetime of fear. Belonging is one of the most divine principles of life. From the moment we are born, our spirit craves to be part of something larger, to feel at home with others. Avoidants, in their effort to protect themselves, cut themselves off from this divine flow. They isolate not because they want to, but because they've convinced themselves it's safer that way. Yet the moment they hear words that validate their identity and invite them into belonging, the walls begin to loosen. That longing they've kept hidden for years starts to surface. And when it does, transformation becomes possible. This is why a single sentence of acceptance can be so powerful. It doesn't need to be grand or dramatic. Sometimes it's as simple as saying, "You matter here," or "You're not too much and you're not too little, you're just right." These words speak directly to the part of them that has felt unworthy, unchosen, or invisible. They affirm both their individuality and their place in connection. And when someone feels both fully themselves and fully accepted, belonging becomes not just possible, but inevitable. The avoidant who once ran from intimacy begins to experience it as nourishment rather than threat. The sentence that affirms their identity and belonging becomes a lifeline, a reminder that they don't have to choose between freedom and love, because real love always protects freedom. And in that realization, the heart that once hid begins to step forward, ready to belong without losing itself. Patterns are powerful. They run our lives far more than we realize. Every thought, every reaction, every behavior is often the result of patterns built long ago. For the avoidant, these patterns are especially rigid because they were formed as survival mechanisms. The moment intimacy feels too close, their nervous system fires off the same script: pull back, withdraw, retreat. It's automatic, it's unconscious, and it feels unshakable. But here's the truth: patterns are not permanent. They can be interrupted, and sometimes it only takes one well-placed sentence to do it. When you say something that completely breaks the expectation of the avoidant, you disrupt their autopilot. Imagine their mind is running down a familiar track. "They're going to pressure me. They're going to need too much. I'll lose myself." Then suddenly, instead of hearing the same confirming message they expect, they hear, "I don't want to take anything from you. I just want to share with you." In that moment, the script doesn't make sense anymore. Their brain stumbles, the pattern pauses, and in that pause lies the opportunity for transformation. Interrupting patterns is not about arguing with the avoidant or convincing them with logic. It's about short-circuiting the old response so that a new experience becomes possible. One sentence can do what hours of debate cannot, because it slips past the defenses and hits the emotional core. Words that break expectation act like lightning. They flash through the darkness and reveal a new possibility the avoidant never considered. Suddenly, avoidance doesn't feel like the only option. The key is authenticity. Pattern-breaking sentences only work when they come from a place of truth. The avoidant has a radar for manipulation, and if they sense hidden motives, the walls go higher. But if the words are genuine, they strike deep. For example, I'm not asking you to be different. I like you as you are. That one line interrupts years of believing they must change to be loved. Or, you don't have to run. I'm not chasing you. That flips the dynamic completely because it removes the pressure that fuels their avoidance. In those brief interruptions, the nervous system gets a taste of freedom and connection existing together. Patterns live in repetition, but they die in disruption. One new experience repeated enough times becomes the seed of a new pattern. So when the avoidant hears sentences that disarm instead of pressure, reassure instead of demand, they begin to expect a different outcome in closeness. The old wiring starts to loosen. Their body learns that intimacy doesn't have to equal loss, and their mind begins to rewrite the rules of love. This is why interrupting patterns is such a divine act of healing. It's not just about stopping a behavior. It's about creating space for a new identity to emerge. The avoidant, who once thought distance was their only survival, begins to feel a new truth. Connection can coexist with freedom. That realization starts with a single sentence, delivered at the right time, carrying the power to interrupt a lifetime of fear and replace it with the possibility of love.